Okay, before we start, my initial idea was to dub everything with AI to English, French, German, etc. But after I tried in different sites and different AI models, I decided that the best would be to just dub everything by myself. It's just like that. So, the good news is that you will hear my own voice. The bad news is that you will hear my own voice. Well, no, that the real problem is that I only know Spanish and English, so I will not be able to adapt all those tutorials to, I don't know, Chinese, German. So, I'm sorry. I will just adapt this to English and we will see. Before we start, just remember, it's been like 8 years since the last time I spoke with someone in English. So you should expect grammar and pronunciation problems that I think that will correct with the time, but because this is the first tutorial, it will be a mess. So I beg your pardon for my pronunciation and grammar, and I promise you that after a few videos I will improve. I'm certain that I will improve because I just need to practice. So it's just a matter of time. My future videos will be probably much better. Hello and welcome to this channel. My name is Martin and you can call me Martin or teacher or professor or whichever you prefer. This tutorial is focused on character creation for Unreal Engine 4 and Unreal Engine 5. While Unreal Engine 5 is the newer version, I believe Unreal Engine 4 still has its place, especially on less powerful machines. Both versions are fully compatible, so I decided to cover both. The original content of this tutorial was in Spanish, but I decided to dub and translate everything. This is an intermediate level tutorial. If you are just starting with Unreal Engine, have less than a year of experience, or struggling with blueprints, I recommend not starting with this material just yet. Even though I will explain everything step by step, it might be challenging to follow if you don't have the necessary foundations. Instead of getting frustrated, I suggest exploring beginner-friendly tutorials first. There are plenty of them available for you to follow, and Unreal Engine also offers excellent learning resources. Once you feel more confident, you can return to this tutorial. Just remember, this material will still be here when you are ready. Learning is a step-by-step journey, just like in traditional education. I can tell you, I'm a teacher, and in education you go through elementary school first, then high school, and eventually college. But you can't skip from elementary school to college. It's just not possible. And then you have the magic of YouTube, where this structure isn't always respected. Which actually leads to what I call level gaps. What I mean is that often people try to learn advanced concepts like algorithms without mastering foundational skills such as maths. I know, it's empty, I've been there, to skip steps, to learn directly from the source, learn advanced topics, it's empty. Especially because there's a lot of video there that promise you quick solutions, videos that promise you how to become a master in Unreal Engine in 2 hours. There's a lot of smoke out there, really. But the truth is that learning any tool like Unreal Engine, like Maya, like ZBrush requires time, effort and patience. So, my first advice is that if you're a beginner, please don't try to leap over this level gap. You should focus on building a solid foundation first. It will be more effective and less frustrating in the long run. Another point that I want to talk about is the disconnection that we will have as a teacher and a student. What I mean is that in a classroom I can directly observe my students. I can see their math, I can see what they're doing, I can correct them on the spot, but here it's not possible. And that actually can lead to frustration. from both sides and even give up. I understand. And that's why I have to ask for your patience. If something doesn't work on the first try, take your time. Take your time, take all the time that you need. And yes, communication. Please communicate that out to me. Communication is the key. Finally, if you need help, please be respectful and clear when asking your questions. Just remember, I'm not being paid for a tutorial. I just record 50 hours for free. So if someone insults or reacts poorly, it makes it harder to offer further assistance. Remember, kindness and respect always open more doors. Learning Unreal is a journey that requires effort and sacrifice. But if you stay focused, committed, and have sheer will, you will master it over time. Okay, let's get to what we want. These are images of some models that I bought from the Unreal Marketplace a few years ago. I use them more or less to show you here how the system works, but we will not use those models in the tutorial. We will just use free assets, mainly because I can ask you to buy the same stuff. Okay, it's just simple. You have other preference with models, so I will just show you this here, and then we will use the normal Unreal Engine mannequin. The system, in fact, or what we call a character creation system, is about finding a way to take an actor, which can be anything, it could be a pawn or wherever, and change its meshes and textures. Those meshes and textures come from a database. So when I click on a button, what I am telling the system is, hey, why don't you look in the database for the meshes and the textures to change them in a given actor. For example, in this case, when I click on any of those things here, I am changing the air mesh and also the texture. But the texture of this air is not the same as the other one. So the system has to make that request and also relate what it is being asked for. For example, in all these cases, there is no change in the face or eyes. Even when I click on these hair options, the hair color remains the same because I am asking the system to change the mesh, not the color, and the color in this case is a texture, so I am not changing the texture. So the system has to be able to search for the meshes, textures, and see when both things need to be changed and when they don't. Here, if I make a change between one and another, I have to change both the mesh and the texture. Both things have to be changed. Here I'm changing only the mesh. Well, actually I'm changing the texture too, but the texture has to relate to the one that was being used before to maintain the color. All of this has to be done by the character creation system, managing the mesh and texture requests from the database and telling the actor to change them. Finally, I have to be able to save this in a save file to be exported to the playable character, because what you see here is not playable. It's just something empty that only has meshes and textures that I am changing. Like if we were, I don't know, a mannequin, but it has no character movement component, no collision, no nothing. It's just an empty pawn. Okay, this tutorial will guide you through creating a basic system for managing characters in Unreal Engine. We will start by setting up several folders because we need to store enumerations, structures, textures, widgets, meshes, and of course a database. As we progress, you will understand how these pieces work together to customize and save the character configuration. Inside the database folder, you will find project-specific files. Each database will be different, as we will build it based on the meshes and material we use in this tutorial. As we work with other character models in other projects, it will be necessary to rewrite it completely. What I mean is that while the system is reusable, all the blueprints are reusable, the database must always be adapted to your current project. Okay, here is the basic structure of what we're going to build. The pawn, the character we will be modifying and working with. The controller, the core of the system, which includes a component responsible for managing changes. And an interface, the bridge between the user and the system, which sends instructions to the controller. This system follows a simple yet efficient flow. First, the user interacts with the interface by clicking a button to request a change. Second, the interface tells the controller what to look for in the database. Third, the controller retrieves the information, a mesh or a texture, and applies the change to the pawn. For example, let's assume that we want to change the character head. When clicking the corresponding button, the interface will instruct the controller to look for the head in the database. The controller will retrieve the mesh or texture associated with the button and apply the change to the pawn. Once all changes are made, we will save the configurations in a datasave file. This will be used in the project's initial level. When the playable character loads this file, all the changes you made will be automatically applied to the final character. Okay, let's create the project. I am going to build this using Unreal Engine 5 and Unreal Engine 4.27.2. Early access for the 5 and the last version that Epic released of Unreal Engine 4. Remember, this tutorial was recorded several years ago, but you can start with the last Unreal Engine 5 version. I will build the system in both engines, but I will show how I build all the blueprints only in one. But they're the same. Coding with Unreal Engine 4 and Unreal Engine 5 is exactly the same. The only difference is that Unreal Engine 5 has more stuff, but it's exactly the same. The first thing that we need to do is to set the project. So let's begin. I am not going to explain how to install the launcher or how to install the engine or how to install all the necessary stuff. This is something that you need to know before you start with this course. Well, we select game and click next, and here we select the third person project. Technically we can use whatever template we want, but we need to select the third person for two main reasons. The first and more obvious is that we need the mannequin, because we're going to use the mannequin as a visual reference to check if we're changing a material or a mesh. And the second reason is because we need that all the changes that we're going to select in the customization page to be exported and loaded in another map, and we will use the third person project map to check if our system is actually working. And here at project settings, you can select wherever you want. I will just start with maximum quality, no ray tracing, and no started content, because we don't need anything of that. And the project name will be whatever you want, but I will call it character creation. Okay, and in this case I have to call it character creation Unreal Engine 4 because I already have that name in the Unreal Engine 5 project, but call it whatever you want. Okay, the first thing that we need to do is to create a folder. We will call it character creation. And before we start, one thing that I would like to clarify is that even though I recorded originally this tutorial in Spanish, I always use directories and files names in English because the English language is summarized, it's condensed, and it's extremely helpful when you need to name something. It's a practical language. And that I always use English when it's come to search for documentation or any kind of guide related to Unreal Engine or any other program. In Spanish, it's virtually impossible to find basically anything. It's like a desert in documentation and in anything that you want to search. One thing is that if you hear some strange noises in the background, those are my two dogs, my two babies, who constantly bark at my bags because they want constant attention. Okay, here we're going to create two folders. Let me see in the other project because I want to use the same names. Okay, the name is core and the second is maps. I try to maintain the same folder structures and names between the two projects because it's cleaner that way. In the first one will be allocated our system, and in the second folder our maps. And to start with this, we could create a default map. Okay, yes, default map, and we'll save this inside the folder called maps, and we are going to call it creation map. And at project settings, we're going to change the editor starting map and game default map to the one that we just have created. Okay, perfect. The first blueprint that we're going to create is the component itself, and we're going to call it blueprint component character creation, and it's going to be our system, right? Our entire system will be defined by this component. What else do we need? Well, we need a controller, a player controller. Call it whatever you want. I'm going to call it PC creation controller. Give me a second. I want to check in the other project if I am using the same names. Yes, creation controller. One thing that I don't like about this Unreal Engine version is that the icons are ugly and quite similar between them. Okay, perfect. We need a game mode. Let's call it GM creation mode, and we also need a widget and the pawn. And I also need to explain which is the function of each blueprint. Okay, and this should be our main widget, but the name that I chose was creation widget. And finally, what we need is the pawn, of course. Let's call it BP pawn or creation pawn, whatever you want. Well, more or less like I showed you at the previous presentation. We're going to use a pawn, which is basically an empty character. There is nothing here, because actually we don't need anything, okay? Just a mesh and a texture. The game mode that we're going to use, I don't know if you know it, but beside the game mode that you define on a specific map, the project has a game mode, but in this particular map, our creation map, we will use our creation mode. So our creation map will use our game mode, and our game mode will load our creation controller. Okay, if you extend here, you will see that our controller is being selected. So basically, our game mode function is to force the use of our controller. In the moment that our map loads, if we added our game mode in the world settings, our controller will be loaded at the same time. If you can see the world settings tab, you can enable it by going to Windows, and there you can select it. Okay, and don't touch anything else, just don't. You will avoid problems. Inside our controller, here, we're going to add a component. Which one? This one. Now, before we continue, I want to clarify something. The question is why I am using this character creation system as a component. Well, it's actually quite simple. It's because I want it to be modular. Okay, I want it to be modular because maybe when I am playing, I will want to load all the creation system. For example, in Dragon Age Inquisition, there is a special place with a mirror, and if you look at the mirror, you load all the character customization system. You can do the same thing in Skyrim. If you go to the commands and write show race menu, you load all the customization system. I love that. I love to be able to change my character appearance mid-game, partially or totally. Having the ability to load the character customization system later in the game, for me, is one of the best things that you can add in a game. One way to achieve that is using a modular component as a vessel for our character customization system. That way it will be modular and we can attach it to whatever actor we want to use, like a mirror or a box or whatever. and then we can just put the mirror or whatever actor you want to use in the level, and every time we interact with that we can invoke all the character customization system functionality back. So inside our controller we will add our component there. Okay, excellent. Our component, which is here because it's defined in the moment that we add it as a component, it's gonna have a very important function, call it initialize, where we basically initialize the entire system. And inside our controller, because we added the component, we can use it to invoke this function on begin play, and that way every time the system loads and the character controller loads on begin play, we will load our character customization system. Another thing that you will have to tolerate about me is that as a teacher I am extremely insistent with aesthetic and order. I always say that an organized person lives happier. Now, what we need is that there is a good communication between the controller, the pawn, the component, etc. Normally I use interfaces for that, but in this case we can cast it because we have a component, a controller, a pawn, a game mode, a widget that are always loaded. Because they are always there, in this particular case we can cast it. If we were in a level where we don't have a direct reference of a given actor, because maybe the actor is spawning dynamically in the level, then it is impossible to cast. You have to use interfaces or other methods. So to begin, our component needs a controller reference. The easiest way to do it it's gonna be in our initialize function, because that function is called inside the controller, and there we can pass the reference of the controller as an input, so we can then create a direct reference of the controller inside the initialize function. We need to create an input here at the right of the type player controller, call it controller or wherever you want. And now if we come back to our controller on begin play, when we load initialize, you will see that our controller input is exposed. In fact, in Relation 5 I did exactly the same, but now that I see it, I call it player controller. So now we can tell the component which controller are we using, and for that, from the player controller input, we extend and search for self, get a reference to self. We extend from here and promote it to a variable. The first thing we're going to do is create a function that will be responsible for loading our character. We could easily place our character in the scene at position 000, like this. I may need to put some order here. Give me a second. we're going to move everything related to lights into a directory. Okay, here, you can go ahead and delete the player star. We won't be needing it. Why? Because this level is not going to be a playable map. The purpose of this level is to show us our character, like a storefront marquee. Okay, let's start creating this system. Okay, this is quite empty for now. And just for now, we're going to load a mannequin so you can see how it looks. We're going to use a component called scene, and this will allow us to group the meshes by categories. It's extremely useful. So we're going to create a scene, and I'm going to call it mannequin. This is just temporal, and inside we're going to add a skeletal mesh component. Call it whatever you want. I will call it, I don't know, man. This skeletal mesh component, as its name suggests, has a mesh and a skeleton. It's going to be our mannequin, and our mannequin mesh is located here at mannequin character mesh, this one, SK mannequin. Okay, I will stop here. Note for the future, if you don't have the female version, I will leave a file containing the meshes for download in the description. And what we have here is the physics asset for interactions and the skeleton for animations. And now you can select the mannequin in 3 ways. One, by selecting it in the browser and clicking the arrow next to the mesh slot. Second, by choosing it from the drop-down list. And last, by dragging it from the browser to the mesh slot. The first thing that we notice is that the mannequin is not perfectly aligned with the floor. And if we go to the editor, well, it's quite obvious. If I raise it by, let's say, 20 centimeters, it looks fine, but as soon as I start changing the mesh or moving it, it won't stay aligned properly. So we need to fix that in the blueprint. The first thing that I want to change is the rotation, 90 degrees. Please remember that this is temporal. I will change the transform when we are actually using the blueprint. Well, if you don't want it to stay still, you can add an animation blueprint, but it will give us an error as soon as we stop the play. You will see. In this case, you can select third person and MVP and see what happens when I click play. To begin with, I don't have a defined camera, and second, since I don't have an actor to possess, the view starts from 0.000. As soon as I will stop this, I will get an error. And what this error is saying is, hey, look, this an MVP you select is not finding setting near. For those that doesn't know what an anime blueprint is, it's actually a kind of blueprint that manages all the movement in a character, all the animation in a character, based on certain rules. Okay. And in this case, what is trying to find out is if the character is actually in the air. The system doesn't know if the character is in the air, in the ground, or falling. And that's happened because our mannequin, our pawn, doesn't have a movement component. We didn't add any. You can see here we don't have a component. And to show you what is actually a movement component, I will open the third-person blueprint. And here you can see the character movement component. And this component is actually the one that allows the character to move. And the error is that in our creation pawn we select the third person and MVP. And that third person and MVP is trying to find out our character movement component. And because we're using just a pawn, we don't have a character movement component. And that's why we got that error. So, what is the solution to this problem? Well, the simplest way to fix this is to not use an MVP, because this is a pawn, an empty pawn. We will not use any kind of character movement blueprint. Probably our best choice is just an idle animation. Set it to looping and playing, and that's it. And if you see, now that we have an animation, our character feet now are underground actually, and we need to fix the location. And now if we play this and stop, we don't have the error. Okay, back to the character creation component in our initialize function. Now what we need to do is to find or get a reference to our character, to our pawn, and we need it here in our function. So we need to search for all the BP creation pawns available in our creation map, and once we get probably the first one and the only one, we will use that as a reference. So we need to create a function called load character pawn. Give me a second that I want to check in the Unreal Engine 5 project for the name. Load pawn, that's the name. Load pawn, and that's located inside the initialization category. And we will locate the functions just after we set the reference of our controller. So to load our character, we will use a function called get all actor of class. And here we will search for BP creation pawn, and then from the array of actors we get the first one and we set it. And we do that by promoting it to a variable, so we can have the reference of our BP creation pawn. Now, before we continue, if we leave the system like this, we may face a problem in the future, because if we load this function before an actual character appears in the scene, this reference will be invalid, okay, because we're loading something empty. So we need to do some validation check before we set the creation pawn variable. So the code flows goes like this. First, search for all the BP creation pawns on the scene, get the first one, do a validation check, and if it's valid, set it and store it in a variable called creation pawn. If we didn't find anything valid, we will return, but I am missing something. Yes, we need to inform if we are actually finding a valid character or not. So we will return a bool variable, call it success, and we will check it. So we will inform true if we found a valid character and false if we didn't. Perfect. So now we have a function that will inform us if the system find any valid character that we could use in the system. I will explain later how we will use this success output because it's important. Okay, and now after this function, what we need is our widget. Let's create a new function called loadMainWidget, and then we add it to the initialization category. And then the first thing that we need to do is to call createWidget. Later we will be able to push it to the viewport. So we search for the class and select our creation widget. Then we promote it to a variable. Let's call it creation widget. And before we continue, I want to do another validation because maybe the widget is already there. Maybe it was created before because you load the character creation in game, and we will first check if there is a valid character creation widget in the system. So right click over the creation widget variable and select convert to validated get, and to speed up the process, just place the code exactly as I show it here, and now place the loadMainWidget function here after the load bound. Okay, now let's create a camera. For the time being, we will use a common camera, but actually in my system I use a scenic camera actor. In this case I will just use a camera because I want to place it, test the location, etc. But once we're coding the camera, you will see that we will use a scenic camera actor. Okay, for now we will leave it here. In a second we will just calibrate all the focus and camera options. Okay, first deactivate the camera mesh because sometimes you can see the camera and it's ugly in the scene. And we also need to be activated by default for our player. So let's search for auto player activation, and here in auto activate for player set it to player 0. Okay, I will leave the rest like this and see what happens now. We are using the camera. We have possessed the camera, so our eyes are inside the camera. Not only that, I have no control over the location or rotation of this camera. I don't have input, and that's exactly what we want, because in any character creation system you can move the character or the camera. You have a fixed location, and in any case you can zoom in, zoom out the camera, but that's it. Okay, this is the location, And also I changed the field of view to 75. Okay, you just place the camera wherever you want. Okay, you can always change it later. If you don't want to see these black bars, let me show you on full screen the one on the side. If you want to change those, it's actually quite simple. You just need to go to the camera, in camera options, and uncheck constraint aspect ratio, and there you have it. Please take into account, if you change the field of view and check or uncheck the constraint aspect ratio, you will have to adjust the camera altitude. Okay, but if you want to hear a piece of advice, don't waste too much time setting the camera here, because we will code a function entirely for the camera. Okay, what's next? We need to see the mouse. So let's create a new function, call it set input mode, and we will place it after we load the main widget. So drag our player controller variable into our set input mode function, and from there extend and search for set show mouse cursor and set it to true. And now if I click play and click inside the screen, I can still see the mouse. Another thing that we need is that our cursor focus is on the widget, and it's a very important thing to consider. It's very common to see focus problem between widgets. That usually happens when you want to click something and you don't have the focus. It's a common problem, but with a very easy solution. The function that we need is this one, set input mode game and UI. Now, as you can see, it needs a widget to focus, and we have an actual widget that needs some focus. Okay, so we just need to feed our creation widget into the in-widget to focus. Okay, let's see if this is actually working. Let's add a button to the canvas. We will anchor it to the top left corner with an offset of 100, and it will be 100 in size. And next we will add a text with the character M, and now we duplicate it. One thing is that this is just temporal. Don't put too much dedication in this, because we will remove this later. So rename it to button M and button F. Okay, now if I go into the editor, you can see that now I can interact with the buttons. I can click on them, and everything is working. Okay, it's time to add the feminine mannequin. Okay, let's begin by renaming this scene. I will use human male. You can use whatever name you want. Before we continue, I want to show a proper example. Here in the character creation Paragon version, you can see all the characters one by one. 15 characters. That means that I had to make this process of creating a scene and add a skeletal mesh 15 times. When I was designing the system, I looked into the possibility of just reading the children of the default root component and add it dynamically on the way, but just looking at an array. But in Unreal Engine 4 I have problem with that. Okay, now let's go to the default scenes roots and add another scenes for our human female. Just one thing to consider is that I am using scenes because I will add several skeletal mesh components inside each scene, because in this case we will build a modular character system. In the Paragon one that I showed you before, I am using just one skeletal mesh. And because when I build the system, I didn't know if I will use it for modular or one skeletal mesh actors, I decided to cover all the possibilities. Okay, now let's add the mesh to the female mannequin. If you don't have the female mannequin, I will leave the link in the description so you can download it and add it here. Okay, now we need an animation. Let's search for an idle animation so we can see how it's actually moving. And you can see now that we have a monster with 2 bodies, 4 arms, 4 legs and 2 heads. And that's okay actually. We're loading all the assets at the same time, but we will toggle the visibility of each one based on a certain rule. In our final system we'll have functions that will toggle materials or meshes, but here in the creation pawn we will have one function that will toggle the visibility. Okay, and we will hide or show not the mesh but the scene, because we will have modular characters, and by toggling the visibility and apply it to the children of the scene, we will toggle the entire set, okay? The arms, the legs, everything. Now what we need is that this blueprint knows how many characters do we have. And remember that we will have a scene component per character. Okay, and at the construction script we will create an array using all our character scenes, so we can keep a variable which we will store all our characters in the system. Pay attention, we are not creating an array of skeletal meshes. No, we will creating an array of scenes component. Okay, scene component. Do not drag the skeletal mesh, okay, because you will have a monster. Okay, pay attention please. And now we will put all this inside a node, because you should know already how I love neatness and how meticulous I am with this thing, so just bear with me on this. Beautiful, exquisitely beautiful order. Next, we need to give a name to this node. So we can know what is actually inside. Okay, let's create our new function, and I'm gonna call it switch character visibility. And for this I will have to do several things, so I will try to go step by step. The first thing that I need is an input. This function will have an input, something that tells me which character I want to see. And because we don't have in the engine something that tells me that we have a character or another, we will have to create an enum with each character's name or reference, so we can use it as an input inside the function. So here at the core, let's create another folder, call it enums, enumerations, whatever you want, and inside this folder make right click, blueprints, enumeration, and call it e-characters. Now open it and create two enumerators, one for our human male and another one for our human female. Then save it and close it. And now if we go to input, create a new one and search for e-characters, we will find it there. And from this input we'll extend and search for switch e-characters. This one. And then connect the switch character visibility function after our create scene array node. Before we continue, I want to tell you that I was making some changes in the widget. I changed the button margin to 50 and 50 because they were too far away, but this is just aesthetic. You can change it to whatever margin or pattern you want. Okay, we will use our character scene array to toggle between characters. Okay, and for that we need to iterate between all the elements inside the array, and we will do that with a for each loop. Then from our array element we will extend and search for a function called set visibility and duplicate it and set them like this. Now from the array element search for not equal and extend from here and promote it to a local variable. Let's call it local character, and now create a branch by holding B key and left click, or by searching for a branch. What we're doing here is to check between all the character scenes array and check if it's not equal to the local one. So basically we're choosing that scene among all the ones inside the array, so we can show the chosen one and hide all the remains. Okay, give me a second that I want to route everything and connect all the nodes and functions, and you can see in the top one that I set the new visibility to false. It should be true. It was an error that I made 2 years ago when I made this tutorial. but you can fix it right now. I will come back to this later, but just fix it now. And I also forgot to connect the right elements to the set visibility in the false section. Now drag the local character and set it twice, one for the human male and one for the human female. Or make Ctrl+C, Ctrl+V and duplicate. And connect everything like this. And finally, what we're going to do is to drag the human male scenes and connect it to our local character for both human male and female. Be careful, we're using the scene, not the skeletal mesh, and set everything like this. And here we have the error that I told you before, but I didn't fix the visibility, so if it's not equal, mean that is another one, we hide it, and if not, we show it. If you go to the construction script, you can see that now with these functions we can actually toggle the visibility in the viewport. So you can switch between human male and female, and you can see that it's actually working. Finally, the last thing that we're going to cover in this tutorial is a small preview of our buttons logic. We need to activate the onClick event on each button, and if you can see them, it's because your button is not set as a variable. So write to the name in the detail panel, enable is variable. Repeat the process from the female button or the male, depending on which one you enable first, so we can have both onClick event, one for the male and one for the female. Now we need a BP creation controller reference here in the widget, but we don't have any. There are several ways in which you can actually obtain a reference, but because we're using the creation controller to create and spawn the widget, in that moment we can pass through the reference. So the first thing that we need is to create a variable that we will call it player controller, and the type will be player controller. Okay, you know, I've been checking the time we have spent, and it's too much for the first class, so we will stop here. But before that, we'll add some basic functionality to the widget. However, what I'm about to do is not the correct approach, so it will only have a lifespan of about one class. In the next session, we'll remove the button logic and do it properly with the necessary validations to ensure everything works smoothly. So right click and search for get all actors of class, and in the actor class search for BP creation pound. Duplicate it, and from the array get a copy. Okay, get the first element of the array with get a copy and index 0. And finally search for switch character visibility. Okay, connect everything like this, and for the button male select human male, and the button female select human female, and it's working. Yeah, finally. Okay, full screen now. If we click mail and we have the mail mannequin, you will see no changes because we're hiding everything that is not the mail mannequin. And beside that, we only have the female one, which was already hidden. So the only way that we see some changes is if we click in the opposite gender of the mannequin that we're actually previewing in the viewport. Alright, that's it. Congratulations to those who made it this far. Remember, you can join our Discord to ask any question or find out about the next video.